Welcome to the ESL Motivation Series. How can a native English teacher teach English to students with zero English? Yes, sounds impossible, doesn't it? And there are many people who will advocate that ESL students in their early days of learning a language should be taught by bilingual teachers to help explain. Well, I'll jump right out there and say no. The best thing in the world for a person who doesn't speak any English is to have someone who really knows what they're doing to teach them solely in English. Being taught by bilingual teachers at an early stage can create confusion and slow down the acquisition of English later. What an ESL student learns in the first few months of English is the foundation for their English for life. So it needs to be pure English right from the start. So why am I so adamant about this? Firstly, most students, and I say 99%, who take an English course have had some kind of basic English training dating back to primary school. Most primary and secondary curriculums around the world have some form of English program, even if it's only 1 hour a week, and the student only learns the ABCs and a few words here and there. This then means that when a student begins an English program later, they will have some starting point. Actually, in the ESL world, these beginners are called false beginners. I'll talk about the other 1% in a minute. So, what are false beginners? False beginners actually find learning English from the absolute beginner's level quite easy with a native speaker. The textbooks available internationally for beginners and elementary students are targeted directly to the kind of beginning levels of English that a false beginner has. These carefully designed textbooks use vocabulary and phrases that most international primary and secondary school curriculums can feed into. And together with a very skilled native English teacher who brings their language level right down to this textbook level, the student can very easily and gradually pick up the language. At our school, ELIT Language Centre, we only use native speakers for all levels, including the beginners. This is for two reasons. Firstly, for the reason mentioned above, and secondly, because the students themselves demand it. They pay almost twice the fees to have a native teach them and want it right from the first level. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about the other 1%. Up until the early 1990s in the Western world, all students of English were false beginners. It really wasn't until the massive influx of refugees who had never been to school at all and couldn't even read and write in their own language that everything in ESL teaching got a big shift. Huge studies conducted on how to integrate these newcomers into the Western world were started. In the past, all immigrants had to do an English course before they were allowed full citizenship. Then suddenly these countries were confronted with thousands and hundreds of thousands of people who had lived only, for example, a nomadic lifestyle with little or no education in their own country. And not only this, they didn't want to be in the Western world full stop. And the very last thing that they wanted to do was to learn English. So how did these countries deal with this? These students were firstly separated from the false beginners and given a new name. They were called the true or absolute beginners. Then everything had to go back to the primary school level, with the teaching of the ABC, with some people even having to learn how to hold a pencil. Gradually over time, with regular revision and persistence, a large amount of this group did manage to make it through their course and come out with at least a smattering of English to get them by in their daily life in their new Western country. The teacher uses not only simple words and phrases, but actions, role plays, dramas, games, not to mention taking it very slow. All this was done with a native teacher as well. If these classes had had a bilingual teacher, Due to the lack of enthusiasm and negative view on the education generally from the students, very few would have made it as far as they did. Saying that, the reason why some of these true or absolute beginners did fail was not because of their teacher, it was more because perhaps of their unwillingness to learn. So I'll say it again. I don't think there is any legitimate reason to put a bilingual teacher into an elementary class level to help them with the vocabulary and explanations. It will do more damage than good. At the same time, I want people to know that I'm not against bilingual English teachers, because sometimes they have an additional thing to offer. But that's something I'm going to talk about on another podcast.